Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to surmise this weekend's action by starting off with the heavyweight contest between Joseph Parker and Shondell Winters. Joe very much looked the part, looked alive, exceeded my expectations a bit. I had Joe stopping Shondell somewhere around 8 or 9 rounds. Joe got it done in 5, and that's very encouraging. That's what needs to be happening for Joseph Parker. It was said, a couple of months ago that they were going to work on making Joseph more aggressive. Get this guy to show more of a mean streak. And that's very much what he put on display in last night's fight, getting off some very big right hands. Lots of bad intentions behind them. Some infighting.
Within close quarters.
Hooking off deep in the pocket. Joe putting that hand speed of his on display. It may seem like a distant memory, back when Joe was a more aggressive body puncher. Most people may have forgotten that Joe has serious hand speed of his own, mid-range to inside. I wouldn't say he's got the kind of hand speed that Andy Ruiz has at that range, but Joe does have some fast hands at that distance in the pocket. Does have hand speed of his own, and he's very effective there. I really liked the double jab of Joseph Parker whenever he showed it. I vaguely recall him putting it to use in the 5th round. I want to see more of that double jab from Joseph Parker moving forward, given the kind of hand speed that he has. It's a very effective tool to get within range of a guy that you don't necessarily have to throw it out there to connect with the guy per se, but that may get the other guy to shell up, to protect himself, and while he's doing that, you can inch forward and get within range to land other punches by doubling up on the jab. In doing so, by Joseph doubling up on the jab, he'll get the other guy to holster his guns and protect himself. And if he's protecting himself, he's not throwing punches at you, thereby allowing you to get within range of that guy. Now, this isn't a big win for Joseph. This ain't the kind of victory that you go shouting from the rooftops about, because I said ahead of the fight, look, Shondell Winters, he's got his virtues, and he seems formidable
for a man his age,
given the circumstances. But at the end of the day, Shondell Winters is not only the older and smaller fighter, but he's also the less battle-tested fighter, because Shondell Winters is not a top 10 fighter himself, nor has he ever beaten or unseated one. This is a fight that Joe should win in good fashion, and that's what he did. So as far as being on the right track, Joseph does appear to be there. That if you're the bigger, younger, stronger fighter, you gotta act like it. You gotta fight like it. You have to look the part. To reestablish yourself as a somebody in this weight class, which has no shortage of killers, no shortage of dangerous guys, you've got to look the part yourself. You've got to look dangerous. You've got to remind people that you're a cut above a certain fighter, that you're a cut above a Shondell Winters and Alex Lepai, those kinds of guys. And the only way to do that is by scoring these highlight reel knockouts, imposing your size, imposing your power, your boxing acumen on these kinds of fighters. That's what Joseph did, so he's on the right track. It was said during the fight that Joe wants to land a big fight sometime before the year is out. I think that might prove a bit difficult for Joe, because many of the big names are spoken for. Joshua's going to be fighting Pulev.
Yeah.
White's going to be fighting Povetkin. Chizora's going to be fighting Usyk.
Yeah.
It has been reported that Deontay Wilder has activated his rematch clause for what will be a 3rd installment of Wilder versus Fury. So all the big names, all the cream of the crop guys, they've all got dance partners. For Joe, that creates a unique problem. Who does he fight if he wants to be in a big fight?
Good question.
Granted, there's no shortage of names out there, but availability is also an issue. I'd say that he should fight the winner of Usyk versus Chisora, but the problem with that is the winner of that fight is going to be in a pole position to challenge the man himself, to challenge Anthony Joshua for those 3 straps. Those things in mind, while the winner of that fight might be a good opportunity for Parker, the winner of that fight might have bigger fish to fry and not put any emphasis on fighting a guy like Parker, a guy on the rebound, a guy on the comeback trail. Makes sense for Parker, but it might not make sense for them. I'd say that maybe Parker could fight the winner of White versus Povetkin before the year is out, but who knows? Who knows who wins that fight? That's the first variable that needs to be addressed. That even now, Alexander Povetkin is still formidable. He still packs a punch. The only way I could really see the winner of that fight fighting with Joseph Parker is if the winner of that fight is Alexander Povetkin. Then you're cooking with rice. But if the winner of the fight is Dillian White, one must ask, does Dillian Whyte feel like giving Joseph Parker another shot? Does he feel like putting time into that endeavor? A rematch? Well, I'm not sure. You can forget about the winner of Wilder vs. Fury 3, regardless of who it is, whether it's Wilder on the off chance it's him. I don't see him fighting Joseph Parker.
Nope.
He'd sooner keep busy with somebody who's already on the same side of the street as him, assuming they don't finally let him have the undisputed heavyweight title fight with Anthony Joshua. I don't see Wilder fighting Parker, regardless of what, and I don't see Fury fighting Parker. You know, if he wins the third fight in similar fashion to the fashion he won the second fight, I'd sooner believe that Fury would go into the undisputed heavyweight title fight with Anthony Joshua. Essentially, regardless of who wins that fight, I don't see the winner fighting Joseph Parker, so that's out. I don't know, maybe Joseph Parker could square off against Michael Hunter. Michael Hunter, who recently locked horns with Alexander Povetkin and fought to a draw. I think that's a decent-sized fight for both of those guys. It's risky, yeah, but at the end of the day, you gotta fight who's there, you gotta fight who you can fight. You gotta fight, because sitting on your hands, that's not gonna get you nowhere. And fighting more Alex Lapais and Shondell Winters that's not gonna get you nowhere either. It's time for Joseph to step it up and be involved in an interesting match. I think Michael Hunter could make things interesting for Joseph. And that guy's free. That guy don't got a dance partner. So maybe Joseph could have a fight with him before the year is out. We'll see how it all breaks down. Congratulations to Joseph Parker for his titillating knockout victory. We then come to what was a more competitive fight, more on the line. There was a world title involved, talking about the super flyweight contest between the then champion Khalid Yafai and the former champion, now current champion, Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito. And, you know, I picked Roman to win this fight, but I picked him to win this fight by way of a points decision via outworking Khalid Yafai. You know, Khalid, he's got his virtues, but he was never the puncher that Chocolatito was. He was never as busy a fighter as Chocolatito was. Throughout the course of this match, you heard it said from Sergio Mora, Brian Kenny, Chris Mannix, that Khalid Yafai was fighting a very counterintuitive fight, that he wanted to bang in the booth with Roman Gonzalez, and this was a bad idea, that, you know, why do that with this guy when you're fully capable of sticking and moving, using your boxing? And what I figure is that maybe what Khalid was thinking was, you know, Roman's not the fighter that he used to be. He's got 2 losses on his record, one of them being a knockout loss to Sor Rungvisai. So maybe what Cal was thinking was he can outmuscle the older, smaller fighter. That might have been the hierarchy of thought. And it's not the worst game plan.
I get it.
At minimum, it can be understood. It just didn't work out for Cal. And I figured more or less things aren't going to work out for Cal. I just wasn't expecting that Chocolatito would knock the guy out. I wasn't expecting that. Perhaps what Cal and his people was thinking was, you know, look at all the success that Sor had by banging in the booth with Roman Gonzalez. Perhaps if we do the same thing, we'll have the same success that he had, not realizing that Cal's a good boxer, yeah, but he's not the puncher that Sor is, and he's not a southpaw like Sor is. So you trying to do that same thing ain't gonna work out the same way. Not for you. And I think ultimately that's what led to Cal Yafai's demise. I want to say that Chocolatito looked a man alive in yesterday's fight, putting that trademark uppercut of his to good use deep inside of the pocket, stringing together several combinations, finishing them off by moving to the right or the left of Cal Yafai to continue the sequence. Very much the busier fighter, gradually gaining momentum as the fight wore on. I mean, we heard it said from Cal Yafai himself in his corner that he was beginning to tire, that this pace was wearing him out. I mean, if we have to talk about strategy and implementation, Khalid made it that much easier for Chocolatito to fight his kind of fight by staying within close quarters of him. He didn't have to work too hard to find his man because his man is standing right in front of him. So all he's got to do is let his hands go, and that's never been an issue for Chocolatito. It was said during the fight that the bookies actually had Khalid Yafai as the slight favorite. That surprised me, as I viewed this matchup as either even money or perhaps Roman would be the slight favorite. That the more proven guy here really is Roman, in spite of the 2 losses and in spite of him being the older, smaller fighter. He still is the more proven fighter, even at this weight, because, you know, Yafai hasn't been in there with a Carlos Cuadras
Or Sor Rungvisai.
or anybody like that, so, you know. Chocolatito is just the latest in a long line of fighters who were immediately written off with no consideration for their complete body of work thus far, that as soon as the fighter lost a fight, everyone considered them finished, washed up, through, and this might have been a bit presumptuous considering that Chocolatito was coming off of 2 knockout victories all before the half. Granted, he was in the rebuilding stages of his career, but better still, this is a guy who was a 4-division champion.
Yeah.
And just like that, Chocolatito proved the naysayers wrong. He proved that he's still got it. And I assumed as much, that, Chocolatito, he did suffer a crushing defeat at the hands of Sorun Visai, but guess what?
What?
Everybody out there ain't Sorun Visai, so everybody's not just going to walk in there and do whatever the hell they want with this guy. I wouldn't say that Khalid Yafai was going for the path of least resistance, or he was going for the low-hanging fruit, but perhaps he did have some misapprehensions about where Chocolatito is at this point. Maybe he thought that this guy's kind of past it. He's not the fighter that he used to be. He's certainly not the force at super flyweight that he was at flyweight or light flyweight. Perhaps he had some assumptions about where Choco is, not realizing that, Choco's still got enough to beat you because you've got some questions of your own that need answers. Congratulations to Chocolatito, and we'll talk more about his victory moving forward, as it has repercussions that will reverberate from here on out moving forward. Congratulations to the new WBA Super Flyweight Champion, Roman Gonzalez. We then come to what was last night's main event, the welterweight contest between Mikey Garcia, his continued campaign as a welterweight, and Jesse Vargas, the once former WBO champion. And I did go with Mikey Garcia to win the fight. I picked him to win the fight by way of a points decision, so in that way, the outcome lived up to my expectations. However, Vargas didn't come out guns blazing the way that I thought he would. He came out using his height, using his jab, putting a stab up top and a stab downstairs. Very cautious, very careful. However, I was right to assume that if any one of these 2 guys is the more accurate guy, if any one of these 2 guys can play the economic sharpshooter, it would be Mikey Garcia, and that the Garcias as a team really know how to devise a game plan. And, I was actually surprised at how damaging Mikey Garcia's shots were to Jesse Vargas. That knockdown in the 5th really turned things around for Mikey, because it looked like Jesse was off to a good start and gaining a comfortable lead up until that knockdown in the 5th. Afterwards, Mikey might as well have been in there with a different guy, because Jesse just couldn't do a heck of a lot thereafter. He was visibly on Queer Street, visibly hurt, and did his best to hang on. A credit to Jesse Vargas for fighting through that and ultimately finishing the fight on his feet. I want to say that Mikey Garcia's accuracy and punching power in this fight was impressive. It was noteworthy, and it just goes to show that he needs a little bit more time at this weight to fully acclimate. That having jumped right from 135 to 147 for Errol Spence was a mistake, a big mistake. That was too much too soon for Mikey. But if he paces himself and gives himself time to grow into this weight class and adapt to it, he can be formidable, because he looked quite formidable in yesterday's fight. However, for a time, Jesse's height, Jesse's reach, it was a factor. It was making things difficult for Mikey. I mean, Mikey, he's not a volume guy, nor has he ever been. But at a weight where most of the guys there are going to tower over you, it doesn't behoove you to be economic, because that could come at the cost of many rounds. And while Jesse Vargas was affected by Mikey's overall punching power, there are other fighters out there who might take a better punch than Jesse does. I mean, I think about a fighter like Yordenis Ugas, for example, a statuesque guy for 147, the same way Jesse is, and a fighter like Ugas could prove to be a nightmare for the likes of a Mikey Garcia, a shorter, stumpier fighter who has to get mid-range to inside before he can do anything. And if the man opposite the ring of him is a statuesque, athletic guy, it could prove to be a long night for Mikey Garcia at 147. He's got to navigate carefully if he insists on continuing a campaign at this weight. And that's what resonates with me the most out of yesterday's fight, that I was expecting that Mikey would win the fight, but you'll excuse me for saying so, that there are bigger challenges, bigger threats at 147 than Jesse Vargas, that you might be able to get a win over that guy. But
Let's not kid ourselves.
there's more to be afraid of at 147 than Jesse Vargas. You know, Mikey's a good boxer. I don't take nothing away from the guy. It's just that at 147, you've got to think about his dimensions, the tail of the tape, that he would approach most every single fight as the shorter, stumpier guy. And Mikey's got his virtues, but Mikey's not all that athletic. You know, he doesn't have the fastest feet or the fastest hands. You know, Mikey's an economic boxer, puncher, takes his time, doesn't waste any shots. He's not a volume guy. He's not a mauler. But in this division, it would be up to Mikey to take the initiative, get on the front foot, and stalk the other guy and stay with him. You know, he'd have to because he's the shorter guy. He's got to get mid-range to inside before he can do anything. That could prove difficult against a Terrence Crawford, a Yorvenis Ugas, hell, even a Mean Machine, an Egidigus Kavaliauskas. It could prove difficult for Mikey because if the statuesque and athletic fighter decides to fight a long-distance kind of fight, there's going to be very little that Mikey can do about it. This denotes what I've been telling y'all along, that I don't really think that Mikey's cut out to campaign as a welterweight, but that's what he insists on doing, so here we are. The only real saving grace for Mikey is that he's not looking at any of those guys, and what he is looking to do is challenge Manny Pacquiao for that WBA welterweight title. An intriguing situation because, as we all know, Manny don't have the biggest frame. He's not the biggest guy.
Yeah, he ain't big either.
Manny and Mikey are pretty much eye level with each other, but the difference is that Manny has much more experience against much more experienced fighters at this weight, and Manny Pacquiao, even here today in the twilight of his career, is a busier puncher than Mikey is. I mean, if you're sitting around giving the likes of Jesse Vargas a lot of respect in the early goings of a fight, you know, you're not quite letting your hands go with this guy for fear of what might come back at you. Just imagine if you're in there with Manny Pacquiao. You can't afford to be that economic with that guy because not only is he a bigger puncher than Jesse is, but he's a busier puncher than Jesse is. And if you're not throwing punches, I can almost guarantee you he is. Consider that Mikey Garcia very much had Jesse Vargas hurt in the 5th round, yet he didn't close the show. He didn't finish that guy. That guy got to hear the final bell, okay? And what that indicates is that even when he had his man hurt, Mikey Garcia was still giving that guy respect. Well, how much respect do you think Manny can get from this guy, this newbie to 147? Most I can say is it's gonna take more than a victory over Jesse Vargas to convince me that Mikey Garcia's cut out to campaign as a welterweight.